Well, the draft lottery was certainly something on Tuesday night. Unless you're a Bulls fan and you watched as it was announced that Orlando had the 8th pick. Some of you may have thought initially, oh my God, that means the Bulls moved up. They moved up into the top 4. That means they keep the pick. Not so fast. It's not how it worked. No. But we did have the NBA draft lottery, which means we now know the final order of picks for the 2021 NBA draft. And obviously the biggest winners of the night had to be the Detroit Pistons. You know, while they were sitting in that kind of second slot before the draft in terms of their odds, the fact that they were able to jump up and be the number 1 team gives them the right of choice to whoever they want. Certainly seems like early on they're going to be pointing towards Cade Cunningham, the guard from Oklahoma State, as being the guy that they hope can come in and start a new era of Detroit basketball. So they were obviously winners of the night, as were Cleveland and Toronto. And I'm going to put my imaginary tinfoil hat on here for just a second because we are talking about the fucking NBA draft lottery. So, yeah. You can't even rig it right, Adam Silver. I mean, you've got like Golden State in the mix and Chicago in the mix, and instead Cleveland and Toronto jump up into the top 4? Ah! Of course, I'm kidding. Totally not. Because the NBA draft lottery has never, ever been rigged at any point in time. 1985, 2008. I'm saying. But obviously, the Cavaliers and the Raptors were surprising winners of the night by moving up into the top 4, certainly helping their draft position. And when you think about it, in a draft like this, where you think there are 4 to 5 guys that are kind of like a cut above the rest, the fact that both of those teams jumped up to get into a slot to take one of those elite prospects in this draft, they got to be feeling really, really good about themselves, as does Golden State. They ultimately get the Timberwolves pick, and they have their own 14th pick, so they're picking at 7 and 14 for a team that was, you know, a play-in playoff team this past season or this season. You know, now you got the chance to potentially package those picks up for an impact player. You could also potentially be talking about drafting some guys that can help your core that you have now. So they were winners on the night, that's for sure. Losers of the night, I think you definitely got to go with Orlando. You know, you're probably sitting there hoping for a chance that, hey, you know, we'll end up in the top 3 here, and you end up with the 5th and 8th pick. Now, it doesn't have to be the death knell. It doesn't have to be all bad news, but if you're a Magic fan, like, you intentionally tanked this year, let's be clear. You traded away Gordon and Fournier, Vucevic. Like, you weren't trying to win games. And that's okay until it doesn't work out and you miss out on one of the top 3 or 4 players in this draft. Then you go like, well, what the fucking hell was the point? But anyways, I'm here now since the lottery is done, giving you an updated 2021 NBA mock draft. All 30 picks of my one-round mock are in the description box down below, so make sure you check it out, as well as follow me on Twitter and smash that subscribe button. For the Detroit Pistons, will Cade Cunningham even want to play in Detroit? And maybe he will. And maybe he'll want to go there. Maybe there's also a piece of he'll go there, and in a couple of years, he can't wait to get the fuck out of there. Like, that's what I'm most curious about here with this situation. Like, obviously for Detroit, if you get the number 1 pick, you have to take Cunningham if you're them, because they have to value that upside. Like, you're talking about, depending on your perspective, you look at him as a Luka Doncic type or maybe a James Harden type. Like, you're talking about big name all-star level of player here with Cunningham. And if you think he could be that, then obviously you're going to take him. You just have to hope that you can build the team around him. Like, that's the thing. You're bringing him in, you got Sadiq Bey and you got Killian Hayes, so you got some intriguing options alongside of Cunningham. But, you know, it's Detroit. Who wants to go to that shithole of a city? I mean, really. And big-name marquee free agents aren't really interested in going there. So how are you going to build a legit team around Cunningham to make him want to stay there long-term in Detroit? That's going to be the fascinating thing for me. And then for the Houston Rockets, like, finishing with the 2nd pick here, it's not a total lose-lose situation for them because they're still going to get what's viewed as an elite prospect in this draft, and you got 2 other first-round picks, so you're going to be able to add some other pieces to a team that badly, badly needs those pieces. But now you're going to be talking about who's the guy. Is it Evan Mobley? Is it Jalen Green? And it feels like right now it's between those 2 guys. Maybe a slight edge to Evan Mobley. I don't really know. Now, me personally, I like the offensive upside and explosiveness of a Jalen Green more than I do the versatile athleticism of a big man like Evan Mobley. But that's just me. And I know there's a lot of folks that are going to say, you know, like, you get a guy like Mobley, like, these wings are more common, these special big men are less common. I don't disagree with that assessment, but you still got to come down to just how valuable and important are these big men really in today's game. Now, you can still get value out of centers such as, you know, what you talk about with Joel Embiid and Jokic and DeAndre Ayton. But, you know, you still got to remember the Suns took DeAndre Ayton over Luka and Trae Young in that draft. And you could say, well, it's worked out well for the Suns so far. It hasn't worked out poorly, but they still didn't take the best player in the draft. You get what I'm saying? Now, how that would have worked out in the long term, who knows if they'd have taken a Luka or a Trae Young or something like that, especially Luka. Like, Luka should have been the pick. Because Ayton's not a franchise changer. Luka Doncic is. But Ayton is a nice player, and he's going to have a nice, long, productive NBA career. And at worst, Evan Mobley is going to have similar type of impact. I just wonder for Houston, like, for them, they need everything. They need everything. Jalen Green, to me, has more upside and should be the pick. But Houston's decision could potentially work out massively well to Cleveland's favor by them being able to get Jalen Green at 3. And I know they've invested a lot in guards and wings in the past few drafts with Colin Sexton and Darius Garland and Isaac Okoro, but the reality is, you know, Jalen Green has more upside than any of them. You got to take this kid and you figure out the rest of that shit later. You deal one of the other between Sexton and Garland. Maybe you deal Sexton. Like, you gotta take this kid if he's there. You absolutely do. Because, again, like I said, his upside is massive. And then for Toronto at 4, like, to be in this position where you're thinking, like, hey, maybe they're drafting a Davion Mitchell or something like that. Then you get into this spot where you could potentially take Jalen Suggs. Kyle Lowry's in his mid-30s, so you get a guy that you could bring in, he could play right away, but long-term he could be that franchise point guard, that replacement for Kyle Lowry. Again, Toronto really wins by moving up a few slots here. The Magic at 5 and 8, you know, to me, they got to gamble on athleticism and upside. You know, that's where Kuminga at 5 and Kai Jones at 8, I think does make sense. Because you suck. I mean, in a derogatory way, it's just a reality. The Magic suck right now. They need to gamble on upside. They need to gamble on those guys that maybe have lower floors but higher ceilings. And guys like Kuminga and Jones certainly represent that. One or both of them may not end up being a franchise changer for this team, but you're in a position where you've got to gamble on these guys. Some of you might look at my pick at 6 and say Sengun over somebody like Scottie Barnes or even Jalen Johnson, Moses Moody. I look at Oklahoma City, again, one of these situations where they've got so many first-round picks in future years. Like, it's okay for them to swing and gamble a couple of times. Sengun is the most polished, to me, and complete big man in this draft as of right now. And you talk about he's played really well over at Besiktas in the Turkish league. Like, he's played really, really well and put up some big numbers there. And if you're Oklahoma City, like, yeah, Scottie Barnes might be somewhat tempting, but what's his real offensive upside? I like Scottie Barnes a lot, but, you know, Sengun could be potentially an all-star level big man. If that's the case at this point, you got to go with the guy that potentially has the all-star potential. Just looking around throughout this draft, one thing that stands out to me is, man, it is really heavy in 2s and 3s and some points. You're going to get some good value here if you're looking for a guard or a wing of some kind. You're going to get some really good value here as you go later on into the draft. Like, as I even look at this mock draft now, and you're talking about, you know, somebody like Cameron Thomas late in round 1. You know, he had big numbers at LSU this past season. Chris Duarte, I know he's like 24, so that hurts his draft stock a little bit, but then you're talking about, this is a plug-and-play guy that he goes to a team that's in the playoffs, makes like an Atlanta or New York or something like that, or even the Lakers. Like, he's going to be a vital role player from day one. I had Jared Butler here at 15, but then I realized that he got referred to something medically in terms of a heart condition, so I didn't want to change it at this point because if he gets clearance, he might be good, but probably knowing that now, I would have dropped Jared Butler quite a bit, maybe even out of the first round entirely. But I'm just, again, I come back to the whole thing of there's not a lot of big men in this draft, so you're probably going to see some teams gamble on some big men, potentially reach, and in some cases feel like they reach massively on some athletic, talented big men because there aren't a ton of them in this draft. Whereas, again, you start looking like, what's the gap as I look at my mock here, and I look at the gap and I say, what's the difference between, let's say, a Keon Johnson at 11 and a Jaden Springer at 20? Maybe there's a little difference, but how much of a difference is there really? It's kind of like I talked about in last year's draft, when you talk about Patrick Williams and then Okoro, and then you talk about Saddiq Bey all the way at like pick 20 to Detroit. Like, was the range of difference that great? It really wasn't. It doesn't make Patrick Williams a bust, but what it means is that you can get a steal like Detroit did with Saddiq Bey last year later on in round 1. I think you're going to see that in this draft. You got some high-level talent, and you're going to see some guys that are drafted in the second half of this round 1 and even into round 2. You're going to see some long-term contributors in this league because this is a pretty damn good draft class and certainly better than last year's.